Hello and welcome to Lynchburg Live. I'm your host, Linda Smith. My guests tonight are Civil War reenactors Kevin Shroyer and Thomas Tarkenton. In addition to reenacting Civil War battles, their company, the 11th Virginia Company G Lynchburg Home Guard, is attempting to conserve the last original battle flag of the 11th Virginia Volunteer Infantry regiment. Did I do that okay?
Yes, ma'am. Well done.
All right, Kevin, Thomas, welcome to Lynchburg Live.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
As we get started, I'll just tell you, either one of you all can answer these questions. Just jump in and however you're comfortable. But could you tell us about your interest in the Civil War and what led you to become reenactors?
You want to fire away at that one first?
Sure. I'm originally from York, Pennsylvania, which is about 30 minutes from Gettysburg. And growing up in that area, it has a rich Civil War history, obviously, much like Lynchburg does, being close to Appomattox and Richmond and so forth. My father had a great interest in the Civil War, as did my uncle. So as I was growing up, it just was kind of natural for us to make visits to the Gettysburg battlefield. And I remember pulling some of my dad's books off of the library shelf and sitting in the living room and glancing through them and looking at the pictures. And I guess that's where my interest in the Civil War began.
Mine began because of my father. I remember as a 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old boy watching my dad read books. And my dad was a traveling salesman, and he traveled so much to Manassas one year that he had earned enough points where we could go stay at a motel in Manassas for free. And much to the chagrin of my younger brother and sister, we went and stayed at this hotel. And it was something that my father and I could talk about, and I knew it annoyed my brother and sister. So I had a great time bonding with my father. And then I grew up just outside of Richmond, where Jeb Stuart was killed, the Yellow Tavern battlefield. And Kevin and I both have a dear friend who can go to Normandy and he can stand on that ground. I don't have that opportunity, but I can drive to Fort Early, or I can get in the car and go up the road to Gettysburg, and I can see that. And I can't go to Normandy, I can't go to Iwo Jima. So the fact that it's so close to home is something that's always struck me.
Do you both have ancestors that were in the Civil War that you know of?
Yes, I had ancestors on both sides. On my mother's side, they were Gettysburg residents, fought for the Union. I had my great-great-grandfather that actually fought in his hometown at the Battle of Gettysburg. I know exactly where his artillery position was. And on my father's side, I also have North Carolina Confederate ancestors. So I have people on both sides. I'm not sure if they ever opposed each other on the same battlefield. I'm thinking if it did, it might very well have been at Gettysburg because of how many North Carolina troops were engaged there. So, yeah.
I have ancestors on both sides. My great-grandfather was raised by 2 Catholic nuns in Gettysburg, so I know there's some sort of Union ancestry there. My mother's grandfather was from Virginia and were Confederate, and unfortunately, I don't do the research on it too hard, but my dad's family was from the Outer Banks of North Carolina, which where the 18th North Carolina was the unit that supposedly shot Stonewall Jackson.
Oh my goodness.
So I really don't want to be related to those guys.
But still having ancestors involved in this gives you a more personal connection, I think, to being involved in what you're involved in.
Absolutely, yep.
All right, how long have you been involved with this?
This is my 8th year.
So you've been in a while.
I've been doing this since 1983.
Oh, you've been longer
Yes,
than
ma'am. I had a little break. I was in the Marine Corps for a while, so I had a little bit of a break. But
how does someone become involved with reenactment?
all they have to do is ask. We love it. When someone new comes out, we all have so much extra equipment, and we want people to come out. We love for people to come out and just say, hey, can I do this? A few weeks ago, we were in Appomattox at the national park, and a gentleman came out, and we were able to outfit him in a uniform. And I'll be honest, I know the gentleman personally. You couldn't have slapped the smile off his face. He was so happy. Cool. So all they have to do is ask.
You know, that was one question that I was going to ask you. Do you call your attire uniforms or costumes?
Costumes is a bad word
Very
with
bad
us. We do a lot of research on our attire and the way we present ourselves as reenactors. Number one, we all read and we want to portray these guys the best we can portray them. Number two, we want to honor them and what they did. And number three, we don't want to look like a bunch of people at a costume ball.
Right.
But I would guess, prefer to say uniforms.
Uniforms.
And we strive very hard to portray as best we can. Kevin's a heck of a lot better than I am, because you can't cover up the chunky monkey.
Yeah, but, you know, the seriousness of what you're doing and the seriousness you approach it with, I think to call it a costume would sort of defile it in some sort of way.
Well, for a lot of us, this is more than, I hate to even use the word hobby, because
Right.
for a lot of us, it's way more, far more than a hobby. It's almost like a lifestyle that we're living. Not to say we live it 24 hours a day, but when we're in that persona, when we're at a reenactment and the wool is on and the tents are up, we are in that mindset of 1864 or whatever battle we're portraying that weekend. For that span of time, for those couple of days, we're trying to do the best we can to live similar to how they lived, to eat similarly to how they ate. But let's face it, we can't come to within 10%
Right.
of what they actually did.
But it's still as close as you can get it.
It's as close as we can do in modern times.
Yes, ma'am, we try.
You know, I was going to ask you, is it an expensive hobby? And then I thought to say, or is that the right word, hobby? And if it's not, what is the right word?
I agree with Kevin. It's a hobby / lifestyle.
Okay.
And can be incredibly expensive. Unfortunately, when new recruits get into the hobby, they make some inappropriate decisions on their uniform and their attire, and ultimately they end up spending more money replacing what they bought because they wanted to get in the hobby so fast, which is why we encourage new people, ask questions, borrow. A friend and I have a trailer and we have tons of uniforms in there, and we can put anybody in a uniform, and you can go and watch the guys and understand what I'm supposed to wear and what I'm not supposed to wear, and you don't end up spending a whole lot of money you don't need to spend. But it can be, if my wife knew what I spent, I would probably be in a lot of trouble.
Speaking of wives, on television sometimes when they show snippets from reenactments, I've seen women in period dress. Do you all have women in your group who are part of this too?
We do.
Yes.
My wife participates.
Wonderful.
I have a 14-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old daughter that participate. And there's different things that the ladies can do in the hobby. We have some women that just stay in camp, and they're great. They cook for us. They wash dishes. I'd hate to use the word subservient, but that's kind of what it is. You've got other women who actually dress up like men,
Cool.
which happened in the war. There were numerous cases of women who went as soldiers, and then we also have women who come out on the field as ice angels. They're dressed up in a pseudo uniform, and they come out and make sure that we're all taken care of, bringing us ice and water during the reenactments.
That's wonderful. What do you see, or what is the criteria for being a Civil War reenactor? Or do you just have to have the passion to do it?
Well, I'd say first and foremost, that's the main thing. You have to have a passion. But like Thomas alluded to, the better educated you are, the more well-read you are, the better reenactor you will be, because like he said, we enjoy when we're in camp and we have a little bit of downtime, we love to have visitors come into our camp and sit down and talk to us about reenacting and about the Civil War in general, and inevitably, they ask you questions, and for that weekend, we're kind of like the experts, so they try to stump us on things and try to trip us up on things occasionally. So it definitely enhances your experience to know about the battles you're reenacting. Before I go to reenact a battle, if it's a battle I haven't studied much, and I do a tremendous amount of reading, but if there's a battle I haven't done much reading on lately, and I'm not sure of some of the major things that happened there, who the main participants were, which units were there from which states. The week leading up to the battle, I'll pull a book or two off my library shelf, which I have a pretty extensive library, as Thomas has seen, and read up on that battle, because I want to know what it is I'm doing out there.
So just out of general interest and passion for what you're doing as a hobby or lifestyle, you really get into history and probably are the go-to people who have the answers about some of these battles.
It's nice. I think, and I'm going to go off topic here for a second, but as a combat veteran, the worst thing we do is the reenacting. My passion is when I get called by school and a school says, can you come in your uniform and bring a couple of your friends, and Kevin always comes, and we talk to the kids, and when you see a kid's face light up, or when you ask a kid a question and the kid gets it right, and you're like, holy smokes. I mean, it's incredible. That's the fun part of the hobby.
And then you know that here's the future of what you're doing right now.
Right, exactly, and it's kind of like fishing. I got a hook in, and now I got a reenactor.
How much time do you invest a month on this?
I'm going to step on his toes. Kevin spends 1,000,000 hours a month. Kevin is our assistant adjutant. He's responsible for signing us up for events and making sure we're covered as far as our bank account, and Kevin is a godsend to the 11th Virginia. I would say, I'll let Kevin answer that, but the average reenactor, probably 30, 40 hours a week.
God, that's a job.
Well, and you could spend as much time or as little, I guess, as you wish to.
Right.
But like Thomas said, because of my duties with the 11th Virginia, I do have a lot of time I have to spend. But if I didn't enjoy what I was doing or think it was important, obviously I wouldn't do it. But I think it is important. And the 11th Virginia is just one of several local Civil War organizations that I'm very much involved with that take a fair amount of my time. I'm also getting ready to, well, I am the president of the Lynchburg Civil War Roundtable now, and I'm also on the Lynchburg Civil War Sesquicentennial Committee, and seems like on a weekly basis I'm getting emails, phone calls from people in the community or sometimes outside the community that need my assistance on something Civil War related here in Lynchburg area.
I just think that's wonderful. You know, that people come to you as a resource for information. How many people are in your company?
25 or so, I guess.
25.
We're up, yeah, about 25.
And it fluctuates for events, how many people can do what they're doing. You know, life gets in the way of the hobby. So,
how many living history or Civil War battle reenactments do you participate in per year?
If you had the gas money and the will, you could go somewhere every weekend all over the country. They're north, south, east, and west, all the way out to California, New Mexico. We typically do something about once a month is when we can get our maximum participation from our group.
I was going to ask you if this is just a southern thing, or if there are companies, northern people too.
Oh.
There are. We actually have a unit that is kind of a sister unit to us that's in New York, and they also portray the exact same unit we portray. And there's a gentleman up there that's buried in New York from the 11th Virginia Company G, and they take care of his grave every year.
That's wonderful. I mean, that really is, so it's really a kind of a national.
Well, it's international.
International.
It is.
American Civil War reenacting is a worldwide hobby. We have people that, in fact, we have 2 members of the 11th Virginia Company G that are from Britain that are dues-paying members of our organization, and they come over about once a year. They'll come over to one of the larger scale reenactments, whether it be at Gettysburg or First Manassas or something like that. They'll hop on an airplane and fly across and join us for an event. So there are people from Germany, France, Britain, all over that come here from for our major events.
So you're really ambassadors too. Kind of.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I think so.
We try.
We try.
All right. Now, please tell me, what is the difference between a living history encampment and a reenactment?
A reenactment is when we reenact a battle. We have a historical script that the commanders on the field hope to portray to educate the public. The public comes and pays a fee to watch us play cowboys and Indians, for lack of better. A living history encampment, we're set up the way the soldiers would have set up, and we're trying to portray the lifestyle the soldiers had. There's sometimes a fee for the spectators to come to that, but I would say probably 50-50. We do encampments and reenactments, but reenactments are for the spectators and the living histories are for us. I think that'd be a good way to put that.
You all have brought some pictures, and Phil, if you'll put the pictures up on the screen, we'll get Kevin and Thomas to tell us what they are.
Those are two original fellows, and I have their names in my office, but I don't recall their names off the top of my head, but they are two original guys in the 11th Virginia Company G. You can see the uniforms. That's an early war photograph. You can see the rather unique uniforms that they have on there. They're called battle shirts. That was something a little bit unique to the 11th Virginia Company G, that style uniform. There were a few other variations of it, but that's an early war photograph of two original members right there.
The ladies from Lynchburg made those uniforms.
Now, this is what's behind us, and I think it's a beautiful picture.
This is the 11th Virginia. We're leaving the battlefield at Bentonville, North Carolina. You can see I'm the captain of the 11th over there on the right as we're looking at it, and my first sergeant, Hank Prosy, there. And you can tell by the two kids you see in the picture, it's a family-oriented hobby. We encourage the kids to come out because that's the future of the hobby. Great battlefield. It's actually on the original battlefield, and off the top of my head, I think that one and Newmarket are the only ones where we get to actually stand on the ground where the boys actually stood on.
It's just a really original picture. It looks like something from history.
And we're going to get into this in a minute, I think, but the flag that my son's carrying is a exact reproduction of the flag the 11th's trying to save right now.
That is the gravesite of Martin Van Buren Hickok. He was the officer, he was a first lieutenant. He was the officer that was in charge of the color guard at the Battle of Five Forks, Virginia in April of 1865 when this battle flag that we were talking about, or we're going to be talking about in a few minutes, was captured. So that's Martin Van Buren Hickok's gravesite. It's in Appomattox County in a church cemetery. And that is what the Medal of Honor looked like in 1860s that First Lieutenant William Wirt Winnegar received for capturing the 11th Virginia's battle flag at the Battle of Five Forks, Virginia. And that's First Lieutenant William Wirt Winnegar of the 19th New York Cavalry. He was the gentleman credited with capturing the battle flag. He received, like I said, the Medal of Honor. Anytime you captured the enemy's colors, if you were a Union soldier, you basically got the Medal of Honor for doing that. And that is a photograph of Lieutenant Winnegar's gravesite up in New York.
I was going to ask you if these grave sites were local.
Now that's in Steuben County, New York, is where First Lieutenant Winnegar is buried. And that is the photograph of the battle flag we are attempting to conserve. That is what it currently looks like in the Museum of the Confederacy in Richmond. That's the one that was captured at Five Forks.
All right. I want us to have plenty of time for you to tell us about the flag. So I understand that the 11th Virginia Company G, your reenacting unit, is undertaking a project to raise funds to restore this battle flag. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the battle flag has been sitting in a vault, in a box, for lack of a better term, I suppose, in the basement of the Museum of the Confederacy in Richmond for some number of years now, as are many other flags, because there just is not enough space in the museum in Richmond to display all these flags. I mean, they have the biggest collection of Civil War Confederate flags in the world. That's why they've opened up a new museum recently in Appomattox, so they have a little bit more room. We just thought it was appropriate that we do everything possible to try to see that that flag is put out in public for future generations to see, and that it also be conserved as part of that effort to keep it from deteriorating any further. And that's what we're doing. We're about a quarter of the way into our fundraising at this point. It takes a fair amount of money to conserve one of those flags. And hopefully by the time it gets conserved, if everything goes according to plan, or better than according to plan, that flag hopefully will be on display in the Museum of the Confederacy in Appomattox by 2015, the 150th anniversary of the Appomattox campaign, because that's when that flag was captured, was during the Appomattox campaign, just a week or so before the surrender.
Can you tell us a little more about the capture of this flag?
The gentleman that captured it, Lieutenant Winter, basically kind of snuck up on the color guard and said, "Throw down your arms." And these guys were hungry. They'd been marching from Richmond. They were worn out. So you've got to think there had to be a degree of enough's enough. There are numerous flags that were issued to the 11th Virginia, but the thing that's passionate to Kevin and myself and the other members of the 11th is this is the last one. And it should be important to everybody in Lynchburg. This came from Richmond to represent the guys from here in Campbell County and Rockbridge County and Bedford County. And it can be a somewhat divisive symbol, but it's how our country was created.
And it's history.
Yes,
it's
ma'am.
history. It's American history.
It is American history.
Because that flag represents both sides. It was carried by Southern men into battle who fought, bled, and died while serving under that flag. But it also has this unique Union side of it, where we know who the Union officer was that captured it. We know the circumstances. I have the exact wording of his Medal of Honor citation, how it reads as to how he captured that flag. So there is a Union side to that flag, and there's a Confederate side, but it's all American history.
It's our history.
You know, there's a man to be honored for capturing that flag. He was doing his duty. Not to say the men that ended up surrendering the flag and were captured weren't doing theirs. They were doing it to the best of their ability as well, and it's American history.
Do you have an estimate of how much the conservation of this flag is likely to cost?
We've talked to the museum. It was kind of neat. We went down there a few years ago and looked at it in Richmond. I guess I should say over there, I'm sorry. But it's about $12,000 to conserve the flag, and we've got a number of fundraising options that we're trying. We've got a very talented artist, and we usually raffle off a painting or a canteen or a drawing. We've created some T-shirts that we try to sell, and to be brutally honest with you, we need some help, and I hope your viewers pick up on the fact that this is Lynchburg history,
right,
for all of us.
And you know, I think people should acknowledge that and take ownership of it, as you all have done. So, have you raised any money to date?
Yes.
Do you know?
We are in the $2,500 range at this point.
But that's still a good start.
Yeah, and we've only been working diligently on it for a better part of a year or so, perhaps. So yeah, we're still in the early phases, but like Thomas said, we need all the help we can get. If this flag is to be conserved, because then that process will take a bit of time,
I'm sure,
to do that. But if it's to be conserved and done and ready to be displayed by 2015, yeah, we're going to need a little bit of help. So hopefully your viewers or someone out there will be of some assistance to us in that regard.
I know you're a runner, Kevin.
Yes.
Do you have any running events or anything like that lined up as a fundraiser for this?
No.
Do you think you might, since I suggested
Well, that's a wonderful suggestion.
Yes,
All
it
the
is.
races I run, I probably should.
Just toss in one more.
I will keep that in mind. That is certainly, with everything else that I do, that's just one more thing I guess I could work on in my spare
One
time.
more thing.
One more thing
Add
to
to
work
the
on.
Kevin list.
All right, so you're hoping after this is conserved that it would be on display in Appomattox for everybody to come. You know,
Yes, ma'am.
school
Yes.
children make trips to Appomattox.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, the new museum that just opened down in Appomattox, they've okayed the display of flag. And having been down there, it's a wonderful museum. I would encourage all your viewers to head down there and look at it. There is actually a bullet that killed Kevin's position, the assistant adjutant, on display, a gentleman from the 11th Virginia. The bullet is in the museum, General Lee's coat and the pen he used and the gauntlet. So it would be incredible for Lynchburg folks to see that flag in Appomattox.
Yeah, I agree with you. We only have 3 more minutes, believe it or not. So I want to ask you both this question. Being involved with reenacting, how has that affected you personally?
I think it's given me a little bit better appreciation for what these guys went through and endured for those 4 years. Like I said, I've only been reenacting for 8 years. I got into it a little bit later in life than a lot. But I've always been very interested in the Civil War, done tons of battlefield tours, read tons of books, been attending seminars, conferences for many years now. I just felt like the next step was to go into reenacting, and it has been that thing that helped me understand even better all this stuff that I'd been reading over the years about what it was like in camp and what it was like on the march and what it was like in battle. Again, only suggesting that what we're doing is just barely the tip of the iceberg compared to what those guys did day in and day out.
Can see how it brings it to life.
I'm going to agree with Kev. I'll be fast because I know you got to close up. But yeah, when I read something, there's that one moment where it just hits you. You're like, holy smokes. But the best part about this hobby is people like Kevin, your friends. When it gets night and you're sitting around a fire with your friends, that's the most incredible part of this hobby.
I can imagine that it is. All right, do you all have a website that will tell people if they want to make donations to this flag?
What we have been doing is directing people directly to the Museum of the Confederacy's
Okay.
website in Richmond. Actually, there's a form and they can contact me or Thomas. There's with explicit directions. Kathy Wright is the woman at the Museum of the Confederacy in Richmond that's in charge of our account for the 11th Virginia flag. But it'd be best just to make donations directly to the Museum of the Confederacy memo section, you know, 11th Virginia Flag Fund, something of that nature.
All right. I thank you both for being my guest on this show and for your dedication to making history, living history.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Thank you again. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's show and will consider making a donation to bring this flag to Lynchburg and to conserve it. My next show will feature Lynchburg Grows. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.